get in your class? Hashtag please, thanks. That's probably not going to be the email that gets you in the class that gets you the ad code, right? What was your example?
I was going to say, like, using slang, like, on social media that you wouldn't use, like, towards your professor.
Right, absolutely. And this is both verbally and textually, right? For me, it's really interesting when I get those emails that's like headed, hey. Hey, sup? What's happening? Bruh? Like, what you want? You know? Are we comfortable like that? Is that the power relationship that we share? Are you adequately encoding that I respect this communication tool that we have between us, and I'm hoping that I can invite you into dialogue with one another. Because there are ways to be very respectful and interpersonal without slipping into somewhat culturally disrespectful. I'll give you an example. Last semester, I had a student who had been absent for a couple of weeks during like weeks 12 through 15, and all of a sudden wanted to come back and say, but I really want to pass the class. And you know, we have an ethic of care at MiraCosta, so as a professor, here are the steps that you need to take to make sure that you pass this class. You know, bullet pointed it out in the email, 3-4 paragraphs. Y'all know when you get that 650 word count that it's a serious email from the professor. And then it came back where, you know, in the email I said, listen, this is what you need to do to make sure that your final project is on point. And no, I'm not taking any makeup assignments because of my, equity policy of all students. I have stopped taking additional assignments. You missed that opportunity. Sorry. Here's what you need to do to make sure you get the points over here. The email back was, okay, cool, I'm gonna do that. You think it'll be chill if I just go ahead and slip you those makeup assignments? And I'm like, one, no. And two, I think this is a little bit awkward because I know that I'm a black woman, female professor with you, but also you are not a black student or urban student or somebody who uses this colloquialism on an everyday basis. And so it was one of those things where he was trying to be cool with me.
Wait, hold on. It's like I'm processing that. It was like, somebody not black, I did that.
Yes, 100%. And I think that's one of the things throughout the semester. I am a professor who very much comes down and I'm interpersonal. I teach public speaking. I have to break down issues of communication anxiety. And so let's get comfortable, but let's still be respectful, right? And so yes, there are moments when, I might drop, hey fam, hey scholars, we're in this together. And at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want any of my students to step out of their own cultural comfort zone or cultural norm to be able to communicate with me. But I have to be comfortable in my own skin, as we've learned growing up from these situations that have challenged us to love ourselves completely, right? And I encourage that from wherever you're standing, from whatever your framework, wherever your worldview is as well, right? So.
And can I add, I think also something to take into account, because something that Professor Hastings touched upon, right, was the conversation via email. We have to decide what's appropriate in written conversation and verbal, right? And so despite the fact that we have all these, well, they're new to me, being a Gen Xer, but for many of you, you've grown up in them. But there's a lot of different forms of communication that we have today that we never had before, right? I tell my students all the time that I went to college and there was no email. I didn't drive a Model T to school. It wasn't that long ago, but it was during a time when there wasn't that opportunity to connect with somebody electronically. Everything was face-to-face. And so despite the fact that we have all these different forms of communication, still that encoding and decoding, a lot of that is based on non-verbal interactions. So the difference between when I say to somebody, yeah, I'm having a good day today. Now on email, you're not sure what the meaning is. Face-to-face, I can pick up on different verbal cues and non-verbal cues to decipher that. So I think also, especially for our students and those who are heading into career opportunities and looking at how do I shift and look at some of these things that we're talking about in terms of code switching, also take into account what is good to be delivered in written, right, versus face-to-face. Because face-to-face, there's an opportunity to actually, in the moment, see, is what I delivered to that person, are they decoding it the way that I think they're supposed to decode it, right? Is there a misunderstanding that's happened, and there's an opportunity in the moment to course correct?
I get curious now, about, how formal we think we have to be on either one of these platforms. What do you all think?
If it's an email, I go straight formal.
Yes.
If you know me personally, and you already know how I talk anyway. So I'm erring on the side of caution.
Do you typically only use email for professional kind of like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because if I know you already have your phone number, I can text you.
Sure, right. So context is everything, like
So
email
if
is,
I don't have your number, then
right.
if we're communicating via email, then that's usually a formal setting.
Yeah, absolutely, right, absolutely. What about Instagram? Oh, you're like, I don't mess with Instagram at all.
No.
Okay.
That's not formal at all.
Okay. Maybe.
I guess it depends on what you're using it for. Like if you're using it
Bingo.
for business.
Yes, bingo. And I think that's where the shift is. And I think that's where the power is in our conversation today as we talk about kind of like where your destiny is going into the future with this new age digital communication avenue that we have. Like YouTube, I was telling, Don earlier, 2005, YouTube entered, the space that we have now. So they became a company. 15 years later, they're the third largest search engine that we use and have over 2 billion hits like every day on their platforms between all of their creators. Instagram also is rapidly becoming one of the tools that businesses and everyday people are beginning to use as a means to be able to be self-employed, right? And to promote their own work for future employment, right? A lot of people don't use, some people may or may not know the story about one of the owners of YouTube. He actually, the owners and the creators of YouTube came from eBay, right? And after eBay got their big hit of lump sum of money, they were sitting around talking about how they couldn't download a video of that Janet Jackson situation during Super Bowl, right? And they created this platform, right? And how that guy there ended up getting on eBay is he sent them a video of like him, just a crazy random video that said, I really want to work for your company. Right? The interview process was over, the contest was over, they had a contest for branding, but he took a leap of like faith and said, I'm just gonna throw this together to show them how badass I really am. And then he ended up getting hired for the company, ended up making money with them when they sold and for billions of dollars, he got his cut, and then they ended up making YouTube, and now YouTube, 15 years later, is one of the biggest search engines that we have. Right? It's bananas. Apple makes $1 trillion a year. That's like a nation, y'all. So even here, these like companies that are creating these communication channels, they're also shaping the practices that we have. And so when you think that Instagram isn't really that meaningful, so you're just posting up last week's party of you like hanging out with whoever, and you're not really paying attention to how you're presenting and representing yourself in the statuses, know that when you apply for that job, for JP Morgan and Chase, that they're going to go through and they're going to look at your Instagram account, and they're going to look at your Facebook account, and they're going to look at your LinkedIn account, and they're going to ask you to do a virtual interview as your first interview to make sure that you're up on game with this digital universe that we have here, right? And so I'd like us to stop thinking about these as necessarily just informal or formal, and more about content creation spaces where you become producers and creators of content. So what you say actually matters. Not to say you have to do anything outside of your personal if you don't want to, but just to say, let's shape the personal so it's representing what you want it to say. Let's code that meaning so that your viewers are actually seeing what you want them to see instead of all that dirty laundry that people post on their Facebook statuses, right? So I think the power, if you will, really comes in literacy, becoming culturally literate in a particular kind of space or place. If you know that the professional setting doesn't like loud suits, you can become literate in what the culture of that particular business space is. And you can say, oh, let me figure out like what is okay. And again, I don't think a lot of people really are, especially if you are a first generation college student, trained or enculturated into that situation where you actually know this is okay or this isn't okay. I think the only reason I knew is because I traveled with the speech and debate team for 4 years, and they told us up front, you're doing blues and blacks because you're going into these types of situations, right? Put your power suit on the last day and kick some butt, right? And so there definitely are people who teach you along the way what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. I think multiplicity is also really important. We talk about being multilingual, right? The multiple kind of communication methods that you can use across different spaces is powerful. Some people get uncomfortable about being in all white spaces. I think that it's perfectly okay to be in an all white space as long as I know what's appropriate or inappropriate for me and what makes me comfortable or uncomfortable in that space, right? And it's powerful for me to be able to maneuver in and out of those spaces at will by my choice, as opposed to being forced into a situation and then having to figure out what's going on from there. And then finally, this is like my favorite word of the year that's come out of this year, is just this equifinality. That there are multiple different ways that people approach situations, conflicts, problems, communication situations, and so there's no right or wrong way to be in a particular space, that we are all co-creators of those codes that we, in those systems that we create with one another. So that's the power, I think, that really, I hope we walk away with, this coding and encoding and code switching situation we've been talking about, so.
Yeah, well, we definitely want to make sure that we hear from you, right? So I'm just curious, based off of what you've heard so far, your thoughts and how you kind of navigate the spaces that you're in, or anything that comes to mind. I brought up my suit. That was in the 80s, right? I was a young 20-something young dude, but that information about somebody giving you the information about what's appropriate until somebody said something. I didn't know. I didn't know the rules of the game. Thoughts? And I didn't mean to put you on the spot over there, but we are recording this, so I just want to make sure your voice is heard.
I think it's best in any situation, first evaluate where you are.
Yes.
Evaluate the room. Read the room. Who are you with? Where are you at? Why are you there? What is the outcome that you want in whatever space that you're in? Then you go from there. So even if you're an exuberant, loud, whatever person, very charismatic, sometimes it's always good to take a beat or a step or a pause and see what situation you're going to be in. You're not going to go into a nunnery real loud. That's just not what you would do. Mm-hmm. And reading the room can definitely help you navigate different landmines along the way. I think that's
Thank you. Something to add to what she was saying. I was just thinking, it's like, what are you there to do? But I was also thinking about what are you willing to give up in order to get it? Because the thing that when I'm listening to this, I'm just thinking of power and how it plays in the situation, and how even in Black History Month we can't say that power is white folks. Because when we say J.P. Morgan, not that you were trying to say anything negative, just you were saying, look, people like J.P. Morgan will be looking at this and go, okay, now I've already got a vision of white dudes, older white dudes in suits, and whatnot, and whether we acknowledge it or not, the purpose of code switching, right, and really trying to navigate and assimilate and and conform to these spaces. If you leave out power, you haven't really, it's like, to me, you haven't really talked about why it's necessary to code switch versus that we all do it. Yes, we do all do it, but why do we all do it? And then trying to navigate these spaces and whatnot, because, and look, I can admit that I'm sitting here as a, tenured faculty member and going, it's like, I don't give up as much as myself as I used to, like, in regards to, like, what am I trying to accomplish and all of this stuff and whatnot, and, but like I said, those power dynamics, it's really important to understand that, like I said, the reason why we code switch is because it is embedded in power dynamics, and so anyway, I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's definitely a rewards and consequence system to if you are appropriate in these situations. You get rewarded in certain ways, and sometimes it's as simple as somebody giving you a compliment, and sometimes it's as like somebody just looking right over you and not saying anything, right? But that power is is complex, right? I mean, we know we can spend a whole semester on just talking about the power relations that are linked up to these cultural complexes and these cultural matrices. Like, depending on our worldview, our cultural positionality, that shifts how we view each of these situations and what we view as appropriate or inappropriate. I've been thinking about this Black History Month. My daughter's 6, she's in kindergarten. All throughout December, it was beautiful to be able to hear her talk about, like, you know, the Jewish holiday, and about Hanukkah, and about, like, you know, they spent 2 weeks on it. I have not heard one thing about Black History Month since, like, not period, point blank, not one thing. I heard Martin Luther King over and over again in the month of January. But since then, there has not been that power for these young people, you know? And so I think you're absolutely right that, you know, without looking at power, we're really not analyzing kind of the meaning that is shared and created and the consequences and the benefits that come out of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess people use it now. But then I was also thinking about, it's like not only is there code switching, but there's also people who are allowed to break the rules. And that's also embedded, that's also deeply rooted in power and relationships. It's like, look, people in the fashion, it's like,
yes.
With respect to my man Don, it's like you saying that you were out of, you know, that you didn't know the language, it was out of the cultural context and all of this stuff to wear these bright, loud, quote, these bright, loud suits in these conservative spaces. There's people who have made their name doing exactly that. And there's fashion designers that break rules all the time. And they get paid for that, while a lot of times, with respect, a lot of those fashion designers are actually praying and culturally appropriating stuff that other people have created, and it means something very different in their cultural spaces to do something like that. And they lift it and take it out, and they make a whole bunch of money off of it, while, you know, and whatnot. And so there's people who break rules all the time. And that's something that's worth being analyzed. Like, you could have been a trendsetter in that space. If you would have just worn that with confidence, I know you was wearing that with confidence. You was handling yourself. It's like, yo, I apologize for my suit.
You know what? When it gets back to that power thing, right? Because what you're describing, and I actually said this to my daughter the other day. She walked out of the house a couple days ago, and she said, "How am I looking?" And the shoes didn't quite work for me, and she was going to go back and change. And I said, "Girl, just wear it like you own it. Nobody's going to question you." But back in the day, and that's what I'm saying, when you talk about power, I felt completely powerless. I had information that I didn't know that was given to me. And then I'm thinking that I've been wearing this for years. This is how I've been going out. And how have people perceived me over that time? So now you're dealing with a whole new realm of thoughts. And every time you walk into a space, you're evaluating, do you stack up with the folks who are in the room?
There were 2 words that were mentioned in this presentation that Professor Hastings talked about: value and meaning, right? And sometimes in the way that we are interacting, those 2 have, they're intersecting, right? So my values for the population and the folks that I am communicating with, right, sync up with my meaning. But then there are some times when they are conflictual. And so I think what Professor Hoskins is talking about is those times when you have to balance and make a decision on the sacrifice, right? Is what is important and what is valued to me, and what is the meaning in that space. Is it worth it for me to sometimes sacrifice some of the things that I value? But that's something for us to think about when we're talking about language and communication and code switching, is really, what do you value, and how would I tell what you value in that space, right? And so that, it can't be, you know, expected that every single person is going to know what the appropriate style of dress, style of communication is, and that's where the social capital piece comes in. I had a mother who was an educator. I had a father who was really focused on me going to college and instilled that in me from a young age. So they taught me at a very young age the difference between the conversations that I was having on the block and the conversations that I needed to have if I wanted to get a job. But some of the things that we do as educators in working with our students is, where then does that lesson come from if you haven't had that exposure? And so a lot of times the way that you communicate connects with what you value, right? And you're not even aware that the meaning that you're giving in that particular circumstance is different than what it is that you're trying to project. So what you're talking about in terms of power also has to connect with privilege, right? And so I own my privilege in that I had individuals when I was growing up who were able to instill that in me and teach that to me from a young age. But I know plenty of individuals, I know friends who when I went to college didn't necessarily get that lesson. And then what is the cost?
So I just wanted to say one thing that I was thinking as I was hearing this, and that is, well, I guess a couple of things. The first one is, you know, what I heard was, it seems as if your ability to be flexible